Remember a couple weeks ago when I did that trap card tier list for Edison format that triggered a bunch of people? Well, we're doing it again with spell cards. Man, I got a lot of stupid comments on that video. Not gonna lie, like I had someone tell me that return and DDV in the top tier was dumb because those cards are basically the same as like Iron Wall or Needle Sealing, and it's just like one third or one fourth of decks in the entire format play return and DDV, and like no one plays Iron Wall and Needle Sealing. I actually like went through all the Ribbit Rulers list just to do the math, and it was just completely absurd. We got the same tier structures last time. We got. I think this is a pretty good way to do it, just because it emphasizes that none of these are bad cards. Like the only cards that got put on the list are cards that are played a reasonable amount in Edison format. So the bad spells are the ones that just like didn't make it at all. There might be some stuff I'm forgetting, or there might be some stuff that I put on the list that maybe I should have put something else on the list instead. Just like understand that I'm operating with limited time when I'm putting this list together. So if there's some stuff that got left off, I apologize for that. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's start ranking these babies. Where do I want to begin? How about like right in the middle with a card like Emergency Teleport? Unfortunately, I think this card is going to go down in not as good. The main problem with it is that, well, first of all, it's limited, which means you have to play multiple garnets for only one payoff. And then, like, the reason you have to play multiple garnets is because there's not enough good psychics out yet. And then on top of this, it's basically just a worse version of another engine. Like, you're better off playing Deep Sea Diva in most situations. Even like the instant fusion zombie deck that played teleport, I think it's just better off playing Diva in there, unfortunately. So teleport it's rough in a couple of ways. I think on paper what the card does is very strong, but unfortunately it is just going to have to go down in not as good. Let's see. Let's look at Gem Spark next. So this card's pretty strong. Main thing holding it back is it's only playable in one deck, right? And then in that one deck, it's also like situationally only useful when you have Alias with it. But when you have Alias with it, it's pretty good. I think this is probably going to put it in less good. Maybe it would be better if I did some context and what I think the very good cards are going to look like before I put this down here, because I do think Gemini Spark is very strong. But the very good cards are going to be more like sort of these one-off power cards that are not quite as strong as Heavy Storm, and we're going to get into that. Maybe I'll do one of those next. But I don't think that Gem Spark is quite on that level. That being said, in Hero Beat, the card is very good, obviously. So it definitely belongs up here. I think this tier is going to be more like situational sort of cards. Well, you'll see as the list develops. So an example of like a very good card is going to be like 1-for-1. I think just like this super generic one-off kind of absurd card. It's not like wins the game tier, but it's definitely between this tier down here and the wins the game tier in terms of what it does. So this card, it's mainly played in Frogs, but it has applications in other things as well. You can use it to get like Cyber Valley and stuff. So it's just like super generic, super powerful. Obviously, 1-for-1 is a spell of all time. But yeah, mainly getting Substitute with it is very strong. And like I said, it does some other stuff, but inherently it's a very powerful card and definitely a playable one as well. I'm going to put it up in very good. Let's see, what do we want to look at next? How about another very good one, which is Foolish Burial. Obviously, there's a bunch of decks that can play this card. Anything that plays Dandelion, Light Sworn, zombies can sort of play it. It depends on the build. A lot of more graveyard-based decks, a lot of like rogue stuff can play it. Amaryllis can play it. Anything with Volcanic Shell could play it. There's like a lot of sort of tier 2 kind of decks that can utilize this card pretty well. Yeah, I mean, Foolish is just really strong, right? It's an insanely strong card. Send one monster from your deck to the graveyard will never not be crazy, and it's definitely still pretty good in Edison format, even if it isn't like, it's not, top tier. But what it does is just very powerful, very generic. I think it belongs in very good. Econ's another example of what we were going to call like a less good. It's pretty much only played in Frogs. It has some like fringe applications in other things. But even in the context of what it's played in, which is kind of narrow, as I said, which it goes for a lot of these things, but it's just sort of like a very situational brain control that's like not as good. I guess it does have applications that brain control doesn't. You can use it defensively. You can use it in battle phase. You can chain it to something, you know. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of just like an inferior copy of brain control. I think that the card doesn't see a whole ton of play in Edison outside of frogs, but yeah, it's decent. It's whatever. I think less good is kind of it's kind of comparable to Gemspark. I think that's a fair way to say it. You know, if you have the Treeborn rotation, if you have the setup, it can be amazing. But a lot of times it's not that good, and it's only really good in that one deck. So yeah. Miracle Fusion. This one's got to go in very good, actually. This card is the whole reason that like Ab Zero decks and Hero decks are so strong and so played in Edison format. I mean, it's just so free, right? It's just a one card summon an Ab Zero. That's insane. That's like actually ridiculous because Ab Zero is nuts. And you could also make Gaia with it, which is good. You can even make other stuff, maybe randomly. I don't know. Mostly you're just making Ab Zero, obviously, but making Ab Zero with one card is so freaking absurd. It's like half the reason Ab Zero is so good. Because Ab Zero is just like guaranteed to trade positively too, and Miracle Fusion is just, man, it's so free. So yeah, I think this is definitely, if there's a very good card in the hero decks, it's got to be Miracle Fusion, right? Speaking of cards that belong in hero decks, let's look at E-Call. I think it's a pretty definitive less good, maybe even not as good. Whoa, what happened? There we go. Maybe even not as good. What do I think about this card? It's just like a, I'm actually gonna put it down in not as good. I mean, it's better than, it's probably better than Teleport because the card is actually viable as like a tier 1 card or whatever, a card in a tier 1 deck. I don't really know. I don't know exactly what all the factors that we're evaluating that would make me say it's better than Teleport. Maybe it's like the same as Teleport because Teleport's like higher ceiling or whatever. But yeah, mainly it's just a much worse Rhoda. Like you're using it to get your Stratos on turn 1 a little bit more consistently, and that's basically it for E-Call. So yeah, I'll put it down and not as good. I think it's not as absurd. Like Econ and Gemspark are actually crazy. Like when they are used in a situation where they're resolved and they're good, whereas E-Call is just like a sort of a little bit of a consistency boost, you know, for hero decks. It's a card that's playable, but I don't think it. Yeah, it probably doesn't belong up in less good. So we're gonna leave it down here actually. All right, who do we want to do next? How about Future Fusion? Wins the game. Does this need to be explained to anyone? I mean, like, yeah, it's in Dragons, it's auto win button. Even outside of Dragons, it's the auto win button a lot of times. I mean, Future Fusion is just nuts. It's one of the craziest cards in the whole format, one of the most hated cards in the entire format, and for good reason. Like, the card is just the ridiculous turn 1 plays that it allows. Like I said, even outside of Dragons, you can just like play Diva Hero, send Malicious, make Stardust turn 1 with a Future Fusion, then Ab Zero's coming down in 2 turns. Like what the card enables is just so stupid. So yeah, wins the game tier easily. What about Trade-In? See, this is a card that's played a little more fringe, but I think as like generic draw cards go, it was up there high enough that I felt the need to include it. How do I feel about Trade-In? Do I think less good? It's played in like Amaryllis and Norlaris pretty much. That's like mostly what it's played in. So 2 kind of roguish options, but it's pretty good in those roguish options, but it's just like a generic draw card. I don't know. Well, maybe down and not as good, probably. Like, it's hard to say. We're talking about decks that are mostly a little bit more fringe, a little bit more out there, like not completely unviable or crazy or anything, but it's only really played in those kind of decks, and it's just like a decent draw card. It's strong, right? It helps those turbo decks, but yeah, probably not as good, I think. Solar Recharge, I think, belongs up in less good. Yeah, it's only played in Lightsworn, but what it does is technically just a better trade-in, right? Like, you get to draw and you get to mill in the mill deck. So that's just really stupid. I mean, anytime you play against a Lightsworn player and they just start activating spells like Charge, Recharge, you're just feeling, no, why did they open like this? You know, so I think Recharge probably earns its way up into less good, even though it's maybe a little bit less generic even than Trade-In. But like I said, Lightsworn's a decent deck, so yeah, probably up in less good. Less good. Gold Sark. I'm really not sure about this one. I think the decks that I think Gold Sark are viable in is like super limited. You know, it's pretty much only good in like Lightsworn. It's decent in Diva Hero and Cat, but it's like kind of meh. It's super slow. A lot of games you feel like you don't want to activate it because it's just like, well, I'm gonna be dead in 2 turns anyway. Especially with Blackwing being so prevalent. I think I'm really back and forth on less good and not as good for this card. I think ultimately I'm going to put it down in not as good just because I've never been a fan of this card. I do play it in Moja Cat actually, but I feel like there's so many options in that deck. You know, you can go to get your cat play, you can get your sweeper, you can get your avarice to put it all back, you know, and like it's a spell you can pitch for monk. So it's like got a decent amount of usability in there. Whereas like with like Diva Hero, it's like what are you even sarking for? You're sarking for Future Fusion, which is like all right, that's in 2 turns. I'm gonna have a cool play, but the whole thing that makes Future Fusion broken is that when you like open it, you just like straight off the bat have a ridiculous play, and it's like in 2 turns. In 2 turns, I'm gonna have a fusion monster in 2 turns. I guess in Dragons, it's good to Sark for Future Fusion, so that's a decent thing. In Lightsworn, you can Sark for JD, but then it's like in Lightsworn, your opponent's trying to race you down anyway, so the fact that you're waiting 2 turns can kind of be a negative. So I don't know. I'm back and forth. I think it could be up here, but I'm going to put it down here just because of a personal vendetta I have against this card. I think it's kind of overrated. Next up, we have Solex. This card's just worse than Econ, I think. So probably... yeah, probably down here. I mean, Frogs don't usually main this. Frogs just like side it, and absolutely nothing else is even playing it at all, pretty much. I think it's fair to put this card down and not as good. And then it like skips your battle phase too is the huge like downside. I mean, that's absolutely enormous in Edison format. You don't get a battle phase. So I think it's decent to put it down there. Typhoon, easy, very good, right? I mean, this card just goes in like every deck. We don't need to explain Typhoon. Typhoon's a strong card, obviously. Book of Moon, I'm going to say not as good. I think this card has fallen off big time. To the extent that it's really playable at all, it's like as a random one-off in back row heavier stuff. It's just like a neg, you know. Compulse has kind of stolen its mojo in a big way. So I'm gonna put Book of Moon down and not as good. I think Major like stocks down moment on this card actually hasn't been seeing much play at all. Yeah, not as good. I mean, it stops brain control, I guess, which is crazy, but yeah. Book of Life. Book of Life. It's only played in zombies, but it is really insane in zombies. I think it goes more with like these cards up here, like Gem Spark, like Econ, like Solar Recharge, where, you know, they're situational, but they're nuts. You know, they are nuts. So yeah, I think less good is fine. Giant Trunade. This is just like the worst sweeper out of all of them. I think it's not really worth playing in anything. Even Dragon Turbo doesn't play it anymore. So I think down at the bottom is it's perfectly reasonable for that one. Going with the theme, I think Super Rejuve belongs in less good. Yeah, I mean, only played in Dragons, but it's absolutely insane in Dragons. So with the way that we've been organizing this tier list, I think it's probably what we're going to have to consider it. Just like weighing the factor of versatility kind of higher. Like only one deck, only one Dragon deck, like one build of the Dragon deck plays this. And yeah, it is very strong, but it's not even like everything in that deck. Like there's still other cards that are very ridiculous to make that deck work, like Few and Red Med. So it's just like a integral part of what makes Dragon Turbo crazy. It's not even the end-all be-all. Brain Control, yeah, I mean, it's Brain Control. Well, it's like, this card shouldn't even be allowed. It's basically just Change of Heart. It's the most ridiculous, stupid spell in the entire format. Definitely like all-time sacky top deck. Just out any board for no reason at all. Like randomly OTK for no reason at all. One of the most hated, most annoying cards easily. So yeah. Mindcon, it probably doesn't belong up in the top, but I think this card's pretty nuts. Yeah, I mean, a lot of decks can't really main it. The decks that can main it, though, it's insane, right? It's nuts. If you're playing any kind of Diva deck, if you're playing, you know, maybe if you just have like a lot of tuners, if you play Cyber Valley with the whole fairy thing, the card is just nuts. The payoff is absolutely nuts for resolving this. Yeah, it's a bit more situational, but it's also kind of generic as well. And like if you take Raikou or Hamster, you just win the game. It's super sacky. It's very powerful. It's a strong side deck card. It's a strong main deck card in a variety of lists, even if it's not played a lot. I mean, Blackwings can play this. I think I think the Minecon is pretty strong in Blackwings, actually. You got the triple Blizzard and Gale. I think you could absolutely just throw Minecon in and, like, sack people with Minecon in that deck. So I think it belongs up in very good just because of that, actually. Because that's a huge portion of the meta. And Minecon just feels super insane. It feels almost as crazy as BrainCon in a lot of situations. So yeah, I think up and very good. I might get in trouble for this one. I think people are going to disagree, but Minecon's nuts. Heavy Storm wins the game. Yeah, yeah. Who's going to disagree with that one? It's Heavy Storm. I think these three are the wins the game ones. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add a fourth to the wins the game. I think Whirlwind is definitively. Whirlwind might be one of the most broken cards in the whole format. Just like incredibly poorly designed for the era that you just get this like stupidly powerful +1 every turn card. It's like if they open Whirlwind, it's like, how do you even win from that point? You have to immediately out it, and then even if you do, your opponent's already just like plus on you by way too much. So Black Whirlwind is absolutely crazy, absolutely stupid as hell. Like all of these, except Heavy, all these top tier cards are just like the most despised cards in the whole format, actually. Heavy's a little different because it's kind of like it's important for balancing and like changing the way people play to make the gameplay more healthy in the format. But, these other three, though, absolutely detested. Okay, Burial. This has to be very good, I think. It's playable in, like, Vayu and Amaryllis. Mostly those two, I think. You could kind of side it in Zombies, maybe. I mean, yeah, Vayu's a huge thing, though. Absolutely. The card is really ridiculous as a power 1-off in Vayu Turbo, and in Amaryllis with Volcanic Counter. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, what Burial does is pretty nuts. So I think it's got to go up and very good. It's not quite wins the game tier, but I think it probably does. It probably deserves to be better than these less good ones. Maybe I could move Rejuve up to very good. I think having Rejuve down in less good is going to get me in trouble, and I don't really care, so I'm going to put it up in very good. Yeah, I think it's probably more ridiculous than this other stuff, maybe. Even though this other stuff is situationally very strong, I think Rejuve and Burial, even being like a bit more specific to certain decks, I think they belong up in very good. So that's what we're going to do with that. Pot of Avarice. This one's just like less good. I think the card is underrated. I think there are a good few decks that can abuse it. I think Cat and Quick Draw are sort of slept on right now. They're not that bad. Like, the Quick Draw Blackwing matchup's really bad, but I think the Cat Quick Draw matchup isn't even bad, like, unless you're playing the plant version, maybe. But, yeah, I think Avarice is decent. I think it's a solid card. I think people really should explore Avarice decks a little more. I think they have some solid potential, so I'm going to put it in less good rather than at the bottom, which is where a lot of other people would probably put it. Rhoda is, like, pretty definitive, very good, in my opinion. It's kind of, it's, like, foolish. It's, like, 1-for-1. It's just, like, a super generic, limited searcher that's, like, very strong. You can get into Armageddonite. You can get into Stratos. You can get into whatever. So you can get Junk Synchro, and you can get Dark Grepher. There's a lot of solid Rhoda targets in the format. So I think Rhoda definitely belongs up in very good. Charge of the Light Brigade. There we go. It has ascended to its rightful place on the list. Anyone who disagrees can kindly screw off. Okay. Moving on, we got 2 left. Where am I going to put these 2? Well, I mentioned before that Giant Trunade is the worst of all of the Spell Trap sweepers, and Cold Wave is the second worst, right? This card isn't played a whole lot. That being said, it is substantially better than Giant Trunade. And, yeah, the decks it's played in generally aren't that good. But it is kind of ridiculous. It is like one of those cards that just ends games for no reason. It's so stupid. It's so powerful. Like, Cold Wave JD, Cold Wave Gyzaris, Cold Wave whatever. It's just, like, really absurd. The fact that it just, like, lets you go positive into their back row and then, like, they can't even make a comeback play on the next turn with, like, a brain control or something because they're just, like, being shut out by Cold Wave and they can't use any of their stuff. It just, like, solos some random stuff, too, like Dragon Turbo or Chain Burn or something. So I think Cold Wave, it's got that, like, crazy variance and crazy ceiling that I think makes it deserve to be up and less good as opposed to Giant Trunade, even though both of them aren't really played that much. But Cold Wave is probably played a little bit more if I really looked. But I think Cold Wave deserves less good. I think the card is just, like, we've all lost a game to Cold Wave, right? I mean, everyone has, surely. Okay, so the final one you can't really see probably because the TCG player logo is in the way or something, but it's Allure. And Allure is definitive very good. Yeah, it's kind of like described as the graceful charity of the format, even though it's not that ridiculous, obviously. But it's just the most powerful generic draw card that we have access to, like by far. Nothing else really compares to it. And there's a lot of strong dark decks in Edison format, so I think Allure of Darkness absolutely it deserves to be up and very good. It's obviously not a wins the game kind of card, but yeah, it might even be the strongest of the very good in my opinion. This card is just really, really good. Having just a draw card that is just this generic, like you don't even have to get rid of the dark first, which is kind of crazy. You draw the 2 first, and then you choose which dark to get rid of. So it's like if you draw more darks, you can, it's just very good. You can even blind Allure. So Allure is a really powerful draw card and definitely very good. All right, that's going to wrap up the list. I think we did a pretty good job on this one. There's not a lot that can really be debated. Maybe you think Minecon doesn't belong up here. That's probably the most controversial choice on the whole list, probably. There may be some down in less good that people think belong in very good or something, but maybe people think Cold Wave belongs in the trash tier. I don't know. Let me know what you thought in the comments section below. As always, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you next time. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Furthermore, if you enjoy my content, you should think about becoming a channel member. You get access to tons of bonus content, and it's a great way to help support the channel.